Conservative leader Erin O'Toole is certainly not the only federal leader facing questions about his leadership. A new poll conducted for the Globe and Mail suggests people may want to see Chrystia Freeland to lead the Liberals into the next election. The primetime panel is back to discuss this. Hello again to Kelly, David, and Catherine. So let's dig into this. Catherine, I'll start with you once again. Why do you think Ms. Freeland is the preferred choice for the people who were surveyed compared to the Prime Minister?
Well, I think this is just one poll, and the numbers are not extremely high, and I'll certainly let David comment on that. But I think, from a Canadian perspective, she's been out there. She's been very visible. She's been, having some success of note with the Americans on files such as the aluminum tariffs and negotiations with the previous administration and this administration. So I think she's been very visible. She has been building her brand this way. And so she's someone that comes top of mind. She's also number two of that government. But I don't think this one poll is necessarily, what will lead to the election if there's an election in 2023.
Let me take you through the numbers. 25% of respondents in this poll conducted for the Globe say Freeland, 18.4 for Trudeau, 12.1 say Carney. And it was conducted between January 21st and 23rd, just 1,049 Canadians. So, David, what do you make of those numbers and what it suggests right now?
Well, if I could have a couple minutes on this, I would. First of all, let's talk about polling, which is that this. Not saying this isn't interesting, but this doesn't tell us what Liberal voters think, much less what the tiny subset of Liberal voters who are going to choose the next leader of the Liberal Party think. So it's worthwhile as a public sense. But for instance, I look at it and I would like to know, well, are those 25% that choose Ms. Freeland, are they Liberal voters right now, or do they just dislike Mr. Trudeau? So that's one question I have. About the Liberal Party, it's in a very unusual state. Justin Trudeau saved the Liberal Party, and us old-timers know it, that it was on the verge of death after the 2011 election until he came along. So we know that. And for the younger, most of the caucus and the younger supporters of the party across the country, they've never known a Liberal Party that wasn't led by Justin Trudeau. For those two reasons, there's never going to be any pressure on him to leave, and I don't detect any pressure on him to leave. What this poll tells me is that alone among her cabinet colleagues, Ms. Freeland has been successful in carving out a public profile, and it's a positive public profile. And so she is indeed, judging by this, and there's no reason not to take it for what it says, that she is, as everybody thinks, the absolute front runner should Mr. Trudeau, who will someday step down, should he leave. I think it's interesting that no other members of the cabinet appeared at all. And I thought it was interesting that Mark Carney, who doesn't really have a lot of public profile and isn't part of the government, scored as high as he did at 12%.
I feel that sometimes, and Kelly, I'll get you on this, these kinds of headlines can be not necessarily a good thing at this stage in the game, even if you're the front runner in them, right?
Well, yeah, in terms of raising expectations a little prematurely, like David laid out. I think it's interesting, and I think it's interesting if things evolve in a minority government situation in a way we didn't totally foresee, if there is some kind of an election earlier, if the Liberal Party still fails to form a majority, if Mr. Trudeau runs again as leader. And I think what Ms. Freeland has going for her right now, if we accept we're in a period of inflation and uncertainty and economic uncertainty in a way we haven't been through the pandemic because there has been all these government supports, she might be seen as a steadier hand on the business or economic side. I think she's carved that out, and that gives her a niche. And I think she probably has some sway among some voters who might even vote Conservative in another election. She might also have some sway among voters who might vote NDP. She might have some broad appeal, and we're seeing that from these numbers. Like David said, it's not today. It could be way too early, but it is definitely interesting in terms of her brand and in terms of someone in cabinet who has the freedom to speak out, whose office sends out news releases in the same way that the Prime Minister does in terms of her daily events. And, I can't help but be wondering right now what would be different in terms of foreign affairs and the rising tensions with Russia and Ukraine if Chrystia Freeland, who is a staunch defender of Ukraine, was the prime minister right now.
Oh, Catherine, let me ask you, they seem to have a good relationship, the prime minister and Ms. Freeland, the deputy prime minister. Do headlines like this, are they paying attention to them? Could it impact things behind the scenes?
I think it's just one day amongst, or one issue amongst many issues, or good news in a day. I think it's discussed, but not obviously at length when you look at the issues on the table every morning with the prime minister. In this case, I think Kelly is right. Of course, she has an opportunity to speak on what matters to Canadians, supply chain, job, their health, what's happening at the borders. And she has a capacity to carry the message on those important issues. That stays in the minds of Canadians. But I don't think this poll made it to the #1 issue this morning around the table.
Given everything else that's going on. David, let me ask you, though, further to what Kelly was saying, depending on how things go in the weeks, months, and potentially years ahead, she could also be associated with, being part of the current system if people do at that point want change, right?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, the reason she has all the name recognition that she does is that Mr. Trudeau has set her up for that. Mr. Trudeau has given her so much prominence. He's made it clear she's not a peer of her cabinet colleagues, that she's a step above, and she's the deputy prime minister and the finance minister and the spokesperson on childcare and all kinds of things. So he is setting her up, and there's no evidence that she tries to organizationally or substantively distance herself from him at all. So they're allies, and she will be, exactly to your point, running on continuity when she runs. She will be the preferred replacement of Mr. Trudeau, and that may or may not be a benefit depending on the circumstances of when it happens.